Hey everyone, and if you like using a desktop environment, then this week's Linux and open source news video is gonna be for you, because we have GNOME receiving a huge cash investment to work on their desktop, but also a lot of other projects. We have some big changes coming to Plasma 6 as the alpha was just released, but we also have the release of the Steam Deck OLED, well, at least its announcement. We have Amazon working on their own Linux-based OS, and we have some more details on Ubuntu's immutable distro. And we also have this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Thunderbird. Most of you probably know about it, but for those who don't, it's an all-in-one suite that handles email, calendar, contacts, tasks, RSS feeds, and chats. Thunderbird recently received a giant update with a full redesign of the app that makes it easier than ever to set up your accounts and to be productive. The interface is very customizable with multiple choices for interface density, view modes, panels, and the ability to place any button you need in the top bar. After this update, Thunderbird is now my email and calendar client of choice. Also, it's fully open source, it's free of charge, and it's available for any Linux distribution, Windows, and macOS. So whether you used Thunderbird in the past or not, click the link in the description below and give the new release a try. You will not regret it. So GNOME just got a sizable investment from the Sovereign Tech Fund of 1 million euros. This takes the form of a grant from a funding organism supported by the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. With this huge sum of money, GNOME will work on its new accessibility stack to ensure GNOME can be used by everyone. They will work on providing an encryption feature for individual home user directories. GNOME will also increase the range and the quality of its hardware support, which might mean better NVIDIA support, as I don't see what's missing for GNOME specifically, or maybe mobile devices, touchscreens, and tablets as well. GNOME will also invest in quality assurance and developer experience to make sure that the desktop is better for users and to draw more developers in. And they will also help expand the free desktop APIs, which is nice because these are used by most other Linux desktops as well. Other areas include systemd, the Linux kernel, WebKit GTK, the GNOME shell and its compositor, Flatpak, GDM, GTK, and the online accounts for GNOME, and a lot more. Now, the timing of this might make it seem like the new executive director is doing a stellar job, but I guess this sort of deal takes a bit longer to broker than the time Holly Million has been at GNOME, and the project gave special recognition to Tobias Bernard and Sonny Pierce, two prolific GNOME contributors, so it's probably more happenstance that this deal happens at the same time as the arrival of the new executive director. Anyway, it doesn't matter, this is great news for GNOME and for the Linux desktop in general. I'm not sure what this German ministry and its funding organism want with GNOME, but since Germany and a bunch of its cities and Länder generally have an on and off relationship with Linux and open source, maybe they just want to fund a project that they actually want to use themselves. Now, Amazon is apparently looking to build a replacement for Android for their line of smart TVs, displays, and other devices that aren't tablets. And this new OS, codenamed Vega, would be based on Linux. Amazon has apparently tasked hundreds of people in their device OS group to build this thing, including a former Mozilla engineer. Sources say that most of the operating system's development is already done, and it's expected to ship on TVs early next year, along with an SDK for developers to build apps, because, well, a smart TV without any video streaming service is pretty much useless. Now, apps will be built using React Native, so with JavaScript, and it's probably a good choice, just because a lot of developers are already using it to build web apps. And of course, this thing is only meant for their smart TVs and smart monitors. It's not meant to replace Android on their Fire tablets, because good luck with that if you don't have all the app library, even though Amazon only uses their own App Store and not the Google Play Store, but it's still another use of Linux for pure consumer-driven products, which is cool. Now let's talk Plasma 6, and it is still full of surprises, as it might also get, on top of all the other features we have talked about again and again, it might also get a revamped icon theme. The main focus seems to be on folder icons for now, with folder icons being less square and looking a bit like the Cora icons, with more rounded corners. The default blue color is still there, with horizontal stripes, and icons materializing the role of specific folders like the desktop, pictures, movies, and more. For now, it only seems to target folders, but I would be surprised if the rest of the icons didn't get refinements along the life of Plasma 6. KDE seems to always proceed by incremental refinements instead of giant changes, and this is still just a proposal that will be discussed. This method does result in smaller changes every time and a slower pace than complete redesigns, but it's also a surer way to ensure that the community isn't pissed off by giant changes, and it's probably better for a project with as many options as KDE has. Now, still on Plasma 6, the alpha is now out, with the complete feature freeze being planned for the 29th of November, which means developers still have about 2 weeks to add things before only bug fixes are accepted. Now, the alpha is still obviously full of issues, but it's apparently pretty stable already, probably because it is not a complete redesign. If you want to try it out, you can, using KDE Neon, the developer edition, although I would still personally recommend not to use it on a production system yet, just in case. The major things you will experience are Wayland by default, color management being implemented, under Wayland only, unification of a bunch of widget styles, the desktop cube effect is back, there's a better panel configuration user interface, there's merging of the overview effect and the desktop grid, there's a much improved Discover App Store, a reorganized sidebar in the settings, there are color blindness correction filters, support for HDR in certain games, floating panels by default, and a lot more. There's only a bit more than 3 months to wait before Plasma 6 is officially out in its stable form, and I cannot wait to use it. I will probably try and move to a beta when that's possible. But we're not done with desktop environments and Plasma 6, and we also have some GNOME updates in this segment. So for Plasma 6, the Breeze theme is also getting a small revamp, with borders within applications being removed. You won't get separators lined with an internal border for each frame of the application. For example, in Dolphin, in the folder view, there is no additional accented colored lining around everything, which makes things a lot cleaner. Now, Spectacle, the screen recording tool, also gained the ability to record rectangular screen regions. The printer's settings page now integrates all configurations within the page without tons of dialog windows opening over one another, and the Plasma panel settings dialog is now completely unified and looks much nicer and much more legible than before. You will also be able to entirely disable notification sounds from the system sound settings. Plasma startup time has been cut down by a few seconds, and 146 bugs were fixed in a week, which bodes well for the final release. As per GNOME, we have an update to Impression, which is a very nice looking tool to create bootable USBs and DVDs with the ability to download ISOs automatically for you. There's Notify, a native client for notify.sh, which lets you send notifications from your own devices automatically through scripts and get these on other devices, now including your GNOME desktop. There's also Kana, an app to learn Japanese hiraganas and katakanas. Fractal, the Matrix client, has a new RC out with a new libadwaita powered look. There's better read receipts and confirmation dialogues for destructive actions. And there's also an update to Footage, which is a small app to trim, flip, rotate, and crop your video clips. So it's cool things all around, a lot of nicely well-designed updates for Plasma 6 and the usual slew of app updates and new applications for GNOME. It's a good time to be a Linux user. Ubuntu revealed a bunch of details on their upcoming immutable distribution, using snaps instead of the usual flatpaks. Like they say, it is not meant to be a replacement for the current Ubuntu desktop, it will coexist with it. What Ubuntu Core Desktop is just a graphical edition of Ubuntu Core, which is meant to run on Internet of Things devices. The benefits are the same as with all immutable distros, so better stability, as it's way harder to mess up your system with a bad library or package, since the file system is read-only, and system services and apps are confined and sandboxed. It's also more manageable, as the system is updated through complete images, so all systems are basically the same, and easier to manage when you have plenty of devices to handle. And since updates are atomic and rollbacks are easy, it's also pretty much impossible to have a non-bootable system after an update. On top of these base advantages, Ubuntu Core Desktop does a few unique things, notably using snaps instead of Flatpak, which is what most other immutable distros use. The distro is split into 5 main layers: the kernel, the bootloader and encryption layer plus snapd, then the minimal bootable system called boot base, followed by the desktop session using Wayland and GNOME, and then an additional base like applications and all they need to run. Everything seems provided as a snap, including the kernel and bootloader, and that includes kernels that ship with NVIDIA drivers. And you can replace the whole desktop session by a beta or an edge channel without replacing anything else. It also embarks the recent beta TPM-backed full disk encryption, and it will integrate with LXD containers, another canonical project, to allow for software development on Ubuntu Core Desktop. Support for Ubuntu Landscape, the fleet management tool of Canonical, and for Microsoft Active Directory are also in the cards. And this looks like a well thought out offering. If you don't have anything against snaps and you want to see what an immutable distro could be, but you also like Ubuntu, I think Ubuntu Core Desktop might not be a bad choice. It's not ready yet, there's still a bunch of stuff to iron out. They say it should be available in 5 or 6 months. They have problems with creating an ISO, with booting an ISO, and there's virtually no documentation yet. So it's not done yet, but it looks like an interesting project if you don't hate snaps. Okay, so let's finish this video with the gaming news. First, we have Valve announcing a revamped Steam Deck with an OLED display. It's still 800p, but it's 7.4 inches instead of the 7 inches LCD of the current deck. So the bezels are probably a bit slimmer. It also supports HDR, which is pretty freaking awesome, and it goes up to 90 Hz now, so expect even smoother gameplay on not too demanding titles. The APU is still Zen 2 with 4 cores and RDNA 2 graphics, but the APU is now using a 6nm process instead of the 7nm of the previous one, so it should come with a bit less power consumption. It also updates the deck to Wi-Fi 6E, and the battery is now 50 Wh instead of 40. It will ship beginning November 16th, and the 512 gigs model starts at 569 euros. Basically, you can still buy the higher-end LCD versions of the deck while stocks last, but once that's done, only the entry-level model will have the LCD, and every upgrade on the capacity will also give you the new LCD and the new APU. Now, personally, I will not be upgrading because I don't game all that much on my Steam Deck. I much prefer using my relatively brand new SteamOS console that I made, but it's still a fantastic device and it still works well, so there's no reason for me. When it dies, sure, I'll move up to the OLED model, but for now, I don't see a reason. If you don't have a Steam Deck yet though, I would recommend you splurge for the OLED model because you're gonna get probably much better battery life, and since the display was really the weak spot for the original deck, then I think the OLED version might fix every issue that I had with the device. And we also have the release of Bazzite Phase 2, a Fedora and Universal Blue based distribution with solid hardware support and a strong gaming focus. It's basically an alternative to SteamOS for regular computers and or for the Steam Deck. It comes with NVIDIA drivers pre-installed if you want them, as well as all the drivers for Xbox controllers. It also brings the Waydroid for Android app support, although this doesn't work with NVIDIA drivers. It has options for the NICs and the homebrew package managers, and a lot more software and optimizations for gaming. And it looks like a very nice option for people who want to replicate the experience they get on the Steam Deck, but with a more regular distro that they can actually use to do other things than just playing games. So yeah, it looks like an interesting option. Maybe I'll give it a shot on a spare gaming laptop that I have lying around, just to see how well it works and if it could replace Holo ISO on my SteamOS console. Oh, and on that note, my SteamOS console has been built using a device from our sponsor, Tuxedo. Tuxedo makes laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. All the hardware in their devices has been picked specifically because it works well with Linux. And that's pretty important because it spares you all the hassle of buying a Windows-focused device and then retrofitting Linux on it and hoping that everything will run well, but you're not 100% sure. When you buy from Tuxedo, you know that Linux will work. Because even in their testing, if they encountered bugs or quirks, they submit patches upstream so the issue can be fixed for everyone. They provide a selection of popular distros, but you can also just slap your own and call it a day. It just works really well. They have a big range of devices that should fit every price point and every need, whether you need a small, affordable laptop or a giant tower workstation. They have everything in between. All devices are very customizable, including your own logo on the lid of your laptop, your own custom keyboard layout, and you can also open, repair, and upgrade all the laptops yourself, including the battery, the RAM, the SSD, and sometimes even the wireless card. So if you need a new computer, stop looking at devices that only ship with Windows, buy something that officially supports Linux from the link in the description below. So thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment. And if you didn't like the video, then you can also click the dislike button and tell me why in the comments as well. And if you really enjoyed the channel, I left plenty of links to support it right down in the video description. So thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!